button that says go live. So hopefully I'm live right now here on Plaid Avengers Twitch channel. The Twitchy Plaid is here tonight. If I could get someone in the chat room, if there is anyone in the chat room, to give me a shout out that you can that confirms that you can both hear and see me, that would be lovely. Therefore, I know that I'm not talking to a digital void. Oh, and we already have some folks in the chat room tonight. First time chatter from Fadi Ghanem that says, "Am I first?" You are Fadi, and not only are you first in the chat room, you're a first-time chatter. So thank you for tuning in and for the chat. Holden watching Twitch is saying hello. Welcome back, Holden. First-time chatter from Smack One saying hello. Thank you for your first-time chat. Another first-time chatter from Road Chewer. Ooh, these are good screen names. Smack One and Road Chewer who are saying hi. Our cover C got Velociraptor head sent my way. Welcome, our cover. Welcome back to Halo Star Max. First-time chatter from Mystify with a 1 as the I. I like that, saying hello. Fatty says, yay, finally my messages are sending. Oh, that's right, Fatty. You sent a, I'm going to say Foddy because it seems like I'm saying Fatty. I'll say Foddy. Foddy, you had emailed me earlier that your screen chat stuff was not working. So, yes, it looks like it's working tonight. I got a first-time chatter from Pinkish00 saying hello. Welcome and thanks for the first-time chat. Road Chewer says, I promised I would show up to 1, but I missed the first few. Oh, we've only had 2. So this is only the 3rd online office hours we've had so far this semester. And the first one was before the class even began. So you've really only missed 1. And by the way, you don't have to do these things. I think all of you all know that coming to the online office hour is completely optional. Hopefully you'll learn some stuff. Possibly in the future, if I do a really great job on a single topic, we can turn it into a flash quiz for more points that you will have a leg up on and be able to ace fairly quickly. So these might be valuable to you point-wise in the future or even tonight. But I hope they're valuable to you as a creator of knowledge in your brain as well, whether you get points or not. But wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you will get some points tonight. First-time chatter from Hop Hound saying hello. Hello, Hop Hound. Ballistic Hound. We got a couple of hounds. Who let the dogs out? We got Hop Hound and Ballistic Hound chatting back to back. Ballistic Hound saying hello, Mr. Boyer. Hello, Ballistic Hound. Emily 2025 says split screening office hours and the basketball game. Don't want to miss either. Hope you're having a great evening. I didn't even know there was a basketball game. Damn it. I try not to schedule these over top of games, but I don't even know is it women's or men? Was it women's or men's basketball? Men's playing Duke. Oh, are we going to win or lose? Duke used to be a powerhouse, but I don't think they're as much of a powerhouse as they used to be. Back in my day, Duke pretty much won every year, not just against Virginia Tech, but against everybody. So the men's team is playing against Duke tonight, and I am sorry I did not know that. Otherwise, I might have rescheduled to Tuesday. But thank you, Emily G., for tuning in and split screening. Hopefully, all of you will do that. Fadi says, yes, you got it. Good. Don't worry about the pronunciation. So most Americans say Fadi, since it's hard to pronounce in Arabic. Well, Fadi works for me if it works for you, sir. Mystifies, oh, okay, playing Duke, men's, got you. And first-time chatter for Merlin the Magician P.I., saying hello. Welcome, Merlin the Magician. And before I get started, well, I guess we actually have already started. Let me do, now that obviously everything is technically working and you can see and hear me, and people are chatting me back, that means everything is working. Therefore, I can officially launch the online office hours. Welcome, friends, to the online office hour for World Regional Geography, a.k.a. World Regions, here at Virginia Tech, home of the Fighting Hokies and they're fighting against the Blue Devils tonight. Let's all be rooting for them while we learn some stuff here. Now, before I start going off on a tangent of my own creation, do you all have any questions, comments, or concerns about what's happening in the class, about assignments? Did you enjoy this week's movie, if any of you saw it? Are there any current events of particular note that are intriguing to you that you would like me to cover, or should we just go to the news? What's going on with you all? How is the semester treating you thus far? How is World Regions playing out for you? And did you like this week's movie? And Katie, which one do I press? Presentation, keynote, or presentation? Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, well, all 5 of you in the chat room have no further comments. But come on, there's got to be something going on in the news that is intriguing some of you enough to come into this online office hours tonight. Back to Fadi, who says the movie was great, wasn't as gruesome as City of God, in my opinion. Yes, not all of them are particularly gruesome. Some of them are actually comedies. We'll get to some coming up soon. And Merlin, the magician, says he thought the movie was better than the one last week. And this week's was it Totsi? Was Totsi this week? I think it was. And both of them are pretty good. Road Chewer says, yeah, movie was short but interesting. Was it Satsi, everybody? One set in South Africa? I forget what I do half the time, so I put stuff out there, and then I'm like, well, what was that? Oh, yeah. Okay, so people are confirming it's Satsi. Yeah, it's a really good movie, even though it's a little dated. The topics and the endemic poverty and wealth disparity and crime and violence depicted in the film are still very topical in South Africa. So even though that movie's 10 or 20 years old, it's really not out of date in terms of a good slice of life in modern South Africa. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. And by the way, there was an alternative ending for the film. I saw both versions. The alternative ending for the film that the director wanted, and then they changed it after they screened it, was that one of the police officers that had a gun on Satsi at the very end got nervous and pulled the trigger, and then there was a barrage of bullets, and Satsi dies getting shot like 55 times. So that was the original ending of the film. I don't know if that would have worked better for you, or if you liked the kind of nicer, softer ending they actually went with. But yeah, I do like that film, and I'm glad that most of you liked it as well. Okay, is there anything going on in the world of current events? What's happening in the world that you would like to know about or hear about? Or what have you heard about in the last week or months that you're like, what in the hell is going on there? I don't understand that at all. Back to Fadi, says, I was really expecting him to still get shot, which would further show the disparity between the rich and poor in South Africa. Yeah, again, if you're with the director, Fadi, that's what he originally wanted as well. But anybody got any news stories or major issues happening on planet Earth that you would like for us to cover in more detail this semester? And I, by the way, usually send out a class survey to let you all pick what regions of the world you would like me to cover in lectures. I have not sent that out yet, but are there certain regions of the world that you would like whole lecture series on? Because you can't really cover the entire planet in a single semester. I don't know how, but I used to do it 20 or 30 years ago. I fail at it miserably now. So I let you all pick which part of the world of the chapters of the book that you have would you like to see whole lectures on. I already getting some comments back. Fadi says, Palestine! A pinkish 00 says, I feel like I'm seeing a lot of propaganda from both sides of the Israeli-Palestine conflict. What's actually going on there? There's 2. Can we just, Bernard Nawium says, can we discuss some practical knowledge about the actual landing in the class? I'm sorry, practical knowledge about the actual landing in the class. I'm not sure I understand you on that one, Bernard. Can you flush out that question a little bit more? Holding and watching Twitch says, last week I was thinking we didn't have time for it, but I was wondering if you have any thoughts on the results of the Taiwan election and China's potential response. That's a good one too. And Colton Cub 3D just subscribed with Prime. Thank you so much, Colton Cub 3D. You are too awesome. We appreciate it, although I still don't even understand what it means to subscribe to this, but thank you for doing it. Okay, so I've got a little bit here from Holden, who wants to know a little bit about Taiwan. And first time chatter, Colton Cub 3D has just come in with a robot face. Welcome, and thank you for your chat and for your subscription, Colton Club. And in terms of the question from Holden about the Taiwan situation, we can and will talk more about that whole drama in later weeks and months of this course, when I likely will do a whole lecture on China, because every time I let people vote on what regions they want to see, China usually wins. Or what regions do you all want to see a whole lecture series on? China almost always wins that vote. So you will see a lot of lecture material, and part of that will be all about Taiwan, to give you all the background of what's going on. Holden is asking a very specific question about Taiwan just held an election. They did, just a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And the winner of that election was of a political party. And I'm not going to start firing off all these facts to you, because you really have to have kind of a solid footing of Taiwanese history for them to make sense. But the political party that the president-elect is from is considered a hype train coming, Katie. A hype train thing just happened. What does that mean? You have a limited time to earn exclusive emotes. I don't know what that stuff means. MC Gen 7 just subscribed with Prime. Thank you, MC Gen 7. Did that have something to do with hype train? Sub-gift or use bits to get the next level? Again, I don't understand what any of these things mean. So hype train it up, whatever that means, on Twitch, and thank you for whoever initiated that. So back to Holden. The president-elect of Taiwan is from a political party that has historically been seen as not necessarily anti-China, but pro-independence. And that really irks China for reasons that we'll talk about when we do a whole lecture on China. The Chinese probably spent untold millions, if not billions, trying to affect that election, trying to use economic and political power to have the other political party win that election. That other political party is more about warming relations between China and Taiwan. So this was a real face-off in this society, which increasingly is a society that is accepting, and the world is accepting, that Taiwan is going to be reabsorbed into China proper. That's the thumbnail sketch here. Taiwan, you heard it here first, will be absorbed back into China proper. For those of you that don't know the Taiwanese story, you're like, well, what does that mean? The Chinese government for decades, if not a century, has claimed that Taiwan is their property. Because of historical events that started after World War II, actually started in 1900, but really culminated after World War II, Taiwan has kind of been separate since, say, 1950, and kind of been running its own affairs, and kind of turned into a democracy, and kind of sided up with the Western states of the world. And that's really pisses off China. And China couldn't do much about it in 1950 or 1960 or 1970 or 1980 or 1990 because they weren't strong enough. Now China is very strong economically, very strong politically, very strong militarily. And so we are living through the end game of what's going to happen to Taiwan. Even when I started teaching 30 years ago, I would say Taiwan will still maintain its semi-independent status for a while because China can't really do anything about it. Now China can do something about it. And so one of the great conflicts we're all expecting here in the still early part of the 21st century is, What will China do? How far will China go to reclaim Taiwan properly? Will they start a war? Will they invade Taiwan? Will they take it over by force? Or will they continue to play the slow game where they just say, no, 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 Taiwan, you're part of us, and you will eventually come back home to mama, and we're going to keep exerting political and economic pressure till you do. So that's the quick backstory of why this Taiwanese election was so important, because every one of the Taiwanese elections are important, because the pro-democracy, pro-independence political party has maintained power for another 4 years, and that troubles China and it causes friction, and it also pulls the U.S. into this mess because the U.S. is a supporter of Taiwan, not a supporter of Taiwanese independence, but a supporter of Taiwan. The U.S. sells Taiwan tons of weapons, perhaps mostly to irk China, but the U.S. and Taiwan have a relationship and have for decades. And so again, now the end game question is, China is now as strong as the U.S. So are these two countries going to face off over the status of Taiwan? The quick answer is probably not. Neither one of these countries really wants to start World War III over Taiwan, but it is a very frictional subject, and this election will make it more frictional for the next 4 years. And it is a source of contention between the two great superpowers of this century, China and the United States. So that's why it's a kind of a big deal. To get back to Holden's actual question, which was if you had any thoughts on the results of the Taiwan election and China's potential response, not really. I don't have any personal response to it other than it's kind of the same old, same old. The president-elect is from the same political party that's been in power for the last 8 years, I think. That political party may talk a big game about wanting to be independent, but they're not going to ever become independent. And I'm not saying that because I don't like them. I'm saying that because over the last several decades, a whole bunch of countries on planet Earth that used to recognize Taiwanese independence have retracted it. So say 50 years ago, there might have been half or 75% of the world's countries might have recognized Taiwan's independence and said, we think you're a sovereign state. That number is down to a handful. Over the last 50 years, and especially the last 20, China has pressured all countries to not recognize Taiwanese independence and not have diplomatic relations with them. And China's so powerful, they've been getting their way. So the current political leadership in Taiwan can say, hey, we want to become independent, and we have a pro-independence plank, but it's never going to work. Even the United States says, no, we do not recognize Taiwan as an independent sovereign state. Even the United States does not, and has routinely not recognized Taiwan independence since 1972, I think. So the U.S. doesn't recognize, virtually none of the other countries on planet Earth recognize Taiwanese independence anymore. The UN has never recognized Taiwan as an independent sovereign state. It's just kind of been in that nebulous, China claims it, but they're kind of independent, so we're all just going to kind of let things lie. Let that sleeping dog lie. Unfortunately, that dog is now awake, and that's why we're going to see some action on this, and likely in the next 4 years. Back to the chat room. Thanks again, Colton Cub and MC Jen, for subscribing. Pinkish says, so does the election really only prolong China reabsorbing Taiwan in the future? Well said, Pinkish. It holds the strange status quo for a little bit longer. China will continue to push. The United States will help Taiwan push back. But other than that, it's kind of just a little bit of a light tug of war. No one's even pulling that hard. It's a baby tug of war. We're just kind of pulling strings here because no one wants a military face-off. Again, we can never predict the future. The leadership of Taiwan could do something ape shit crazy and just decide to launch missiles or declare independence or do something else, but I don't see that happening because everybody knows how that story will end. I mean, we think we do. We think we know how that story ends. Maybe the United States would come save the day, but the United States has made no indications that it would come save Taiwan if China were to invade or if the two entities got into a shooting match at all, China and Taiwan, the U.S. has made no indication it would intervene. But we never know. We never know, now do we? Who would have predicted that a small group called Hamas would go and attack, have a terrorist attack on a sovereign state and cause the current war in the Middle East, which is spiraling out of control? Nobody predicted that one, and I think that's what we're going to start talking about next. But to finish off the chats for now, Hophound says, what effect will this have on our computer chip sourcing Silicon Valley economy? Oh my God! Hophound, bam! Mic drop. Well played, Hophound. Even though I've now explained, and again, I've just given you a thumbnail sketch of the situation with Taiwan and China. And you might think, well, Boyer just said they're not going to be independent. They'll probably be absorbed, likely without any missiles being fired over a longer period of time. They'll slowly economically and politically be pulled into China's orbit. And so therefore, it doesn't really affect me, does it? Yes, it actually does. And Hophound, that is awesome, Hophound. I think I owe you some points for that. Hophound, be sure and hit me up on email. I think I got even 5 points for dropping that great question. Because indeed, this election and China's stance towards Taiwan does affect you. And it actually affects things, I think, positively in the United States. And what Hophound is referring to is chip sourcing. Taiwan is currently, and has been, I think, for decades, the #1 microchip processor on planet Earth. And it has a huge industry. They have a whole area, just like the Napa Valley of Taiwan, where all of these chips are being produced. Well, why would that affect the United States? Well, because Taiwan is such an important part of the production chain of all computers and cell phones on planet Earth, and we source a ton from them. The United States has already strategically been looking ahead for the last several years, actually saying, well, if Taiwan's eventually going to be absorbed by China, we cannot have a critical technological component of our society in the hands and controlled by a on-again, off-again enemy and a potential enemy in a war. So that is what we call a critical industry to national defense. So the United States for years, and now it's being accelerated, is been opening its own, or encouraging, I should say, chip manufacturers in the United States to produce more, and also encouraging, I think with some success, Taiwanese manufacturers to relocating production facilities to the United States. That's a big deal. That's part of kind of I guess you'd call it a self-reliance, self-sufficiency. It's called, that actually has a term, if I were to give you a quiz, which I don't think we're ready to start giving quizzes on these podcasts yet, but if I were to give you a quiz, I often do this during lecture. I'll be like, this would definitely be a test question. It's called decoupling. So the U.S. and China have been on again, off again in kind of a trade war situation where we slap a tariff or tax on their stuff and they banned something from the United States being imported into their country. It started under former President Trump, where he was like, nope, the Chinese are getting too many strategic economic advantages. I'm going to cut off all their economic advantages. We need to be more self-reliant. So this has really manifested itself mostly in the chip situation. And the United States and other countries have said, look, we're not embargoing China. We're not severing trade ties with China. We're strategically decoupling from the Chinese economy, just in certain areas. Decoupling. It's become a hot phrase. And again, this means we're not trying to piss you off, China. We're not going to start a trade war. We're not going to embargo and refuse to buy any of your goods or services. We're looking at strategic industries that are in our national self-interest and defensive interest that we cannot rely on getting them from you. So we're going to decouple components of our trade relationship. So we don't want to rely on you for microchips. Because, of course, there's a big theory, or maybe it's a conspiracy theory. Maybe it's true. I don't know. That, all these production elements of cell phones and computers that are produced in China can have tracking devices or viruses in them, or can take over your computer or take over your cell phone. That's one of the big fears with this whole TikTok thing that's been going on, between the United States and China, that TikTok can have malicious components of it that will be able to spy on every single America who has TikTok on their phone or computer, and they'll be able to download information and pirate information from you and get critical personal information from you that may not be of corporate significance or military significance. It's not that they're stealing corporate. It's not corporate espionage or trying to get military secrets from your TikTok account. The way it's been explained to me is, no, the TikTok thing is more nefarious. The U.S.'s fear, and other countries, the fear is that they're getting personal information from you, the TikTok user, and that they're storing that information, including perhaps all your cell phones and conversations with all your online sex apps that you crazy kids are doing out there, and that they will then use that information when it is of strategic interest to them to blackmail you. So if they've gotten if they've gotten dirt on you, in other words, then the Chinese government can use that dirt that they supposedly have gotten from TikTok, or TikTok taking over your phone, to use it against you if you work in an industry that they're interested in getting information from. If you work for the DOD, they're going to be like, we got dirt on you and all them sex apps. So now you owe us, and you need to get some information from us. I don't know how true any of this stuff is, but that's the story that's being told about and that's the swirling stuff, that TikTok is now a national security issue because of all of that stuff I just said. Again, how much of that do I believe? I don't know. I don't use TikTok, so I don't care. But the U.S. government cares enough about it, and you do have to understand that TikTok, all Chinese companies answer to the Chinese government. It's not like the United States. So Apple, say in the United States, the U.S. government could go to Apple and say, hey, we want all of the user data for everybody you've sold a computer to. And Apple legally can say, hell no. Those are privacy laws. We're not giving you user data. That is not true in China. China can and does regularly go to every company that works in China, and they say, give us all you got. Give us all the information on all your users, and those companies have to do it. I have heard these companies argue about this, and I've heard lawyers for the Chinese government that say, that is preposterous, that can't happen. Bullshit. It definitely happens. The Chinese government controls, if not outright, but has the power to control any element of its economy it wants to. And if you step out of line in China, even if you're a business person, you will answer to the Chinese government. And if you don't believe that, just go Google millionaires and billionaires arrested in China. There will be a whole litany of folks that the Chinese government just threw into jail because they didn't like what the hell they were doing at the company. Anyway, I've gone off on a long tangent here. So, Hot Pound, thank you. That was a great question. That's what we do the online office hours for, because then you'll just tweak something in my head, and then I just spun off 10 minutes of conversation, and hopefully you learned something from. J.K. Waite says, can you touch on the election in Finland? Now that they are in NATO, I would guess that there is going to be far less caring about not pissing off Russia. I haven't really followed the Finnish election, JK, but let me look into that, and I'll get back to you next podcast. But yes, not only is Finland the most recent inductee into NATO, but Turkey has finally given the green light for Sweden to join NATO. However, Austria is now the holdout who's not going to allow Sweden to join NATO for a whole bizarro backstory that's impossible for me to explain right now. The bigger question is, if Donald Trump gets reelected as president of the United States, will NATO even matter? Donald Trump has historically not been a fan, doesn't care, has been more friendly with Russia, does not particularly care about Ukraine. So NATO has been growing and becoming more powerful with the introduction of new members. However, a single U.S. election that's coming up this year will determine how much teeth NATO has and if it will even hold together. This is not an anti-Trump rant. I don't particularly care about U.S. politics. I only point out things in U.S. politics when they affect the rest of the world and stuff that I teach about in this class. And it is bizarre that the world's strongest and most successful military alliance in all human history could be undone this year by a single dude in the United States who just don't like it. And that is a much bigger issue than whatever leader in Finland thinks about NATO, or even Sweden, or even Austria thinks about NATO. What the U.S. president thinks about NATO is all important, and that could be changing soon. Holden Watson says, yeah, it has been interesting to see countries support the Taiwan election results but not acknowledge it as a separate country out of fear of China. That is correct, Holden. Virtually no country still recognize Taiwanese independence. That number is plummeted in this century. First time chatter from DV Swally, or DSV Wally, one or the other, says, is there anything special about the economy of China? I think I heard somewhere that they were trying slowly to convert to something closer to capitalism / market economy while staying communist, but I don't understand how that would work. Is that all fake? Well, I just alluded to that a little bit, DV. It's not that it's fake. You will learn much more about this, one, when you read about world economies, which I think maybe you already did. No, you haven't done world economies yet. So the next chapter, next week's lectures in the chapter of the book deals with world economic types. The chapter you're reading this week is about world political types. A lot of people think that China is a communist country. They are not really communist. They have a communist party that's in charge, but they're a one-party state. They really do not follow any communist ideology at all anymore. Communist ideology is very much about economic equality, political equality, utopia that the great Soviet Union was trying to achieve. It has always failed. Every iteration of communism that's been attempted so far has failed. And China has not failed necessarily, but China's flirtation with trying to be communist certainly failed. And so they're communist only in name, and that is their political party that's in charge is called the Communist Party. That's about all that's communist about China, is the name. So they really are more of a capitalist market economy, but like I was talking earlier, but with heavy state intervention. So back in the day when Chairman Mao was in charge in the 60s and 70s, they were trying to be a true communist economy, meaning the government controlled all of the economy. The government ran all the factories, all the farms, all the mines, all the production, all of it. And they distributed jobs and wealth, and they gave out services like education and healthcare based on the political entity named China controlling the Chinese economy. Well, that never really worked out so well. So since the 80s, communist has been slowly reverting to something closer to free market capitalism, which is let people start businesses and let them do their thing because it works better. And then, we'll tax them and we'll create wealth that way and maybe just redistribute benefits in that manner. However, China's kind of a hybrid. They've allowed businesses to flourish, but as I've suggested, the Chinese government is still quite in charge of them when they want to be. They are heavily regulated in terms of the Chinese government could go into any company and arrest or fire the leader if they don't like them. Chinese businesses better never get involved in politics or the Chinese government will shut them down. Business leaders never talk about politics. They never take a stance. They never take a side about anything because if they do, they'd be shut down. So while it's not a command economy anymore, that's what we used to call the communist style of economics, is it's a command economy. That is, the central government commands what's going to happen economically. That always fails. However, they're not completely free markets. So there's some hybrid between a command and a market economy where they let things happen, but they still control a lot of the elements of what's going on, if that makes any sense. They don't get in the way of the cell phones being made, but they have their hands in the pie and they know what's going on and they can hire and fire people and they can control the flow of information and they can control personnel and they can control whatever they want to. But they let it go when it's working. They just clamp down when something happens they don't like. Does that make sense? Thanks for your first time chatter, DV. Let's see. JK says, I think the CCP recently called for the liquidation of the Evergrande, some huge real estate conglomerate. Yeah, which was a huge scam. Apparently, real estate is how Chinese citizens invest. Yes, JK, you're completely right. That actually just came out today in the news. Evergrande, this giant real estate corporation, which built not just a building or two, and not just a city, a town or two, or not just a village or two. They built massive buildings. They built whole villages that no humans are living in, whole big apartment complexes and housing complexes that nobody's living in. As the Chinese economy has boomed in the last 20 years, all this money was floating around, and so companies started up, and they're like, oh, well, everybody's going to buy a house, so we're going to build 10 billion houses. And then they also sold stock. And so people were like, wow, this company's doing really good. They're building all this stuff. They're going to get rich, so you buy their stock. And it turns out it was a big, it wasn't a Ponzi scheme, but it was a big shell game. This company's built so much stuff, nobody's been buying it. So instead of letting true market forces prevail, and what I mean by that is, if a company in the United States built 10 billion houses and nobody bought them, the company would go broke. They would go bankrupt and their shareholders would lose everything. China doesn't want that to happen. And this is how the Chinese government still commands how the economy works. So this real estate company, Evergrande, is broke. I mean, they have to be broke. They just built billions of shit that nobody wanted. And they have all these holdings all over the country. But instead of letting the market prevail and they go bankrupt, the Chinese government has been floating them. And now the Chinese government's going to just take it over because the Chinese government doesn't want them to collapse. They don't want all the investors to lose their money. They don't like economic or political instability. So the Chinese government is stepping in to make sure everything's going to be okay for the investors and that nobody will really know what happened to Evergrande because the Chinese government's just going to say, no, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. And the investors will get their money, and then Evergrande's just going to go away. BM Cog says, oh, hello. I am late. I was doing your book quiz. Well, welcome, BM Cog. You're never too late. BM Cog says, I got the crazy credit. I am sitting around at 160 points as of now. Is that average for now, or is that pretty low? That's not bad. That's pretty average. Some people have over 400. Again, you could do all the book quizzes tonight if you want to. I don't recommend it. Do things at your pace. But that's not bad. It's a good, solid start, BM Cog. Remember, we're only in day 1 of week 3. We got 16 weeks all together. So it's early times yet. But keep doing everything, BM Cog. You're going to get there. Yane Treddy says, what's up with the Israel finding supposedly thousands of employees of the UNRWA implicated in helping Hamas? Is it related to the UN starting to scrutinize Israelis' bombing? Yes, that's another big story this week. And I don't know that it's thousands, but the story is that the United States, Great Britain, and a handful now of other European countries, and maybe some others outside of that, have pulled all their funding to Palestinian aid through the United Nations, because there is, and I obviously do not have any idea what the truth is, but the speculation is that some of the people working at the United Nations in this group that distributes aid were actively part or helped the Hamas terrorist attacks. So that just broke a couple days ago, maybe 3 days ago. When news this hot and this weird happens quickly, I try not to comment on it. It's very early. It's a very strange story. It has horrible implications for Palestinians if it turns out to be true. Not that their lives are not already horrifically miserable, but if it turns out that that is true, all of these donors are going to not give any money at all to 2.1 million people that are slowly starving to death. It's already a horrible situation. It's going to be made much worse if any of these allegations are true. But it's early yet. I can't speculate besides what I've just read on the news like the rest of you. First time chatter from JCVT that says, I'm a bit late. The movie this week was really interesting. Well, thank you, JCVT. I'm glad you enjoyed Satsi. We talked about it earlier. Let's see. First time chatter from DCL Kid. who says, this isn't really related to current events, but is it possible to join the email list for the Campus Plaid Avenger photo hunt? Oh, I totally forgot. How many of you would like to do the Where's Waldo? Place your plaid professor for points. I usually don't start that till about now in the semester, but it's so cold. I hate for people to have to go outside. Maybe I could try to find some inside Where's Waldo shots. Yeah. If any of you in the chat room, because you would be the ones who do it, any of you students who are here on a Monday night watching me blather on Twitch, you're the good students. You'll be the ones that actually do the Where's Waldo. So if y'all want that, you all hit me up on email or here. Okay, we got people already hitting us up. And I will do it for you all. If there's at least a handful or two of you that want me to do it, I'll do it. And that's the Where's Waldo, where you have to figure out where the Plaid Avenger is, and then you have to duplicate the picture. You can't just guess where the Plaid Avenger is. You actually have to find the actual geographic space and take a picture of yourself in his stead. Okay, so let's see. Smack1 says, sounds fun. Pinkish says, Pinkish is in. Huff Hannah is in. Mystify is in. Emily is in. Holden Watton Twitch is also interested in that. And Fadi wants to join the list too. Okay, that's enough. So we'll start doing it maybe as early as next week. We'll have to teach Bright how to do that. Fadi says, do you think the U.S. is going to do, I think you're meant to say, what do you think the U.S. is going to do about the genocide in Palestine? And do you think the U.S.'s stance will change after the U.S. election this year? Two very different questions. In fact, one of them is a loaded question, Fadi. So Fadi asked, what is the U.S. going to do about the genocide? Okay, first, Fadi, we have to take a step back. What's going on in Palestine is horrific. What happened to Israel with the terrorist attack of Hamas back on October 7th was horrific. What's currently happening to the Palestinians is horrific. It's a mess for everyone involved, but there are a lot of Palestinians dying. However, this has not been labeled as a genocide by any United Nations body. In fact, a big thing came out just late last week where it was a UN statement that said, we call on Israel to prevent acts of genocide and prevent civilian casualties as much as possible. Okay, that's very different than saying we believe that Israel is conducting a genocide. No country that I know of, well, I take that back, probably Iran and a few others. Most countries are not happy about what's going on in Palestine. Most countries would very much like to see Israel reel back the violence. Most countries would like to see Israel perhaps even stop the war in Palestine. However, not many countries, to my knowledge, have called it out as a genocide. South Africa actually is one that did. However, and I'm not saying this to protect my ass. I don't care if people want to attack me. I'm just trying to explain things to you. The United Nations body that's in charge of identifying things as a genocide has not made that call. It has not gone through a vote at the United Nations. So we, as civilian outsiders, should not take it upon ourselves, certainly not me as an instructor, to call this a genocide. That would be an opinion. If you believe a genocide is occurring, that is an opinion. I cannot speak to that. I don't have an opinion on it. I, like most folks on planet Earth, I would say most governments on planet Earth, are still treating this as a war event that is going horribly wrong and perhaps is excessive. That still is distinct from genocide. You're going to learn about this maybe even this week in the textbook. Genocide is a very specific term. It means something very specific. And genocide specifically means that one party has the intent on completely and utterly wiping out a different group of people and their culture in its entirety. Okay? Israel would say, look, we're not trying to wipe out all Palestinians and their culture in its entirety. We're trying to get this terrorist group, and we're conducting a war to get this terrorist group. That is what their angle is. Most countries, including the United States, hesitantly agree with that. They say, yes, this is not a genocide. Israel's conducting a war against Hamas. It's not trying to kill every Palestinian. It's conducting a war against Hamas. The problem is, and maybe, Fadi, this is your opinion, that this is a genocide. The problem is that a whole hell load of Palestinian people are dying in this war. A lot. I think the total is over 26 or 27,000 now. And it obviously is going to get way higher since there's not enough food, aid, clean water, or medicine for 2.1 million people. So this situation is horrific. It will get more horrific. More people will die. And nobody is particularly happy about it. All of us, I think anybody with common sense or a decent heart, hopes that this will resolve itself quickly with a ceasefire at some point, and Israel can kind of be talked off a cliff of total annihilation of the entire Gaza Strip in order to seek out this handful of of people we call Hamas. Your second part, I don't know if that answered your question, Fadi. I hope you don't think I was trying to elude your question. I'm not. I'm trying to speak bluntly and transparently. The second part of your question is a little bit easier to answer, and that is, do you think the U.S.'s stance will change after the U.S. election this year? Yes. If Donald Trump retakes the presidency, Donald Trump will very likely say, I don't care. I don't care what Israel does. We are a fan of Israel. My administration is a fan of Israel. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Kill them all. Now, I'm not saying he's going to say kill all the Palestinians, but Donald Trump will certainly support Israel doing everything Israel wants to do. In fact, I don't think this is speculation. I'm pretty sure he said this. Joe Biden, on the other hand, if he wins the election, he has been trying very hard to, again, contain Israel's wrath and Israel's ire and Israel's destructive power in this situation. Not very successfully, but he will continue, him and his Secretary of Defense and all the diplomats will continue to try to get Israel to slow things down, call for a ceasefire, work towards a peace settlement, all the rest of that. So it is again, this election coming up in the United States, I don't care about the U.S. elections. I try to ignore U.S. elections. They're just too much of a circus and they take too long. However, I do talk about U.S. elections when they have an impact on world events, and this one certainly does. So as we just talked about, the difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, polar opposites when it comes to things like NATO, and polar opposites when it comes to things like what's going on in Israel's war against the Gaza Strip and Hamas right now. Polar opposite views, and when that election occurs, it will result in polar opposite diplomatic plans and actions and tangible effects that will result by the U.S., the leader of the U.S., having very different opinions about what should happen in the world. Okay. Sorry if that took too long on that. Let's see if I missed any comments here. JK says, do you have any examples of successful theocratic states? It seems like all modern examples and attempts are tumultuous, like Israel, Iran, ISIS never seems peaceful. Theocratic states, there's one theocratic state, Vatican City. Vatican City, JK, peaceful as hell. Just Pope and a bunch of dudes running around chanting and stuff. There's no war happening there. However, the best example of a theocratic state is Iran, for sure. No ifs, ands, or buts. A theocratic state is one in which a religious leader is the leader of the state, has all the power. And in both the Vatican and in Iran, a religious leader holds all the power, holds all the rings, has all the rings of power, pulls all the strings. And so you can like Iran or hate Iran, depending on your point of view and your cultural background. But they are a theocratic state, and one that has been functioning and a powerful political state since 1979. In fact, they're so powerful. Let's turn to that now and talk a little bit about what I was going to talk about, but you guys started asking great questions, so I just went off on a tangent. And that is, I'm sorry, it's 8:50. 8:50, everybody. It's 8:50. You have from now until 8:52 to email me right this second. Email me with your real name from your real address so I can give you points, and you all just earned 5 points. And all you have to put in the subject line is Iran is a theocratic state. And you just got 5 points. You only have 2 minutes, though. You only have 2 minutes. 2 minutes, clock's ticking. Email me at JOBOYER that you were here in the chat room. And there you go. Katie put it up there. Now, I will pick this up next week because we only have 10 minutes left. But I'm glad because this is how I like things to happen. I like for you all to start a conversation and ask particular questions. And now I can say, hey, I actually did want to talk about that stuff. And so we'll only start to talk about it right now. But this is a big deal, what's happening in the Middle East and with Israel and Israel's war on Hamas. And by the way, the Hamas attack on Israel, which started all this back on October 7th. I know that wasn't even this semester, but events happen in between and amongst semesters. So I will likely end up talking a lot about this semester, probably right here in this very chat room, because it is a pretty big deal. And it's a pretty big deal because it's starting to spiral out of control. And what I mean by that is, did anybody see this story? From earlier. Just yesterday, a drone bomb sailed into an army base in northern Jordan. And I think it's more of a strategic supply, engineering, planning, ops type of base, not one where they're like launching missiles from. But again, I'm not privy to DoD information. But I think it was more of a not troops running around shooting missiles type of base, more of a defense strategic provisions supply type of base. Anyway, this base in northern Jordan, a U.S. Army base, was attacked by a drone 48 hours ago and killed 3 people. And this is the first U.S. fatalities in the Middle East for quite some time, and certainly the first U.S. fatalities in Jordan. And so this is a big deal. And it's a big deal because what a lot of folks are wondering from this story you see here is expert react, 3 U.S. service people killed. Will the U.S. strike back at Iran? And you're like, wait, I thought we were talking about Palestine. Didn't Fadi ask about Palestine? And didn't he, Fadi even mentioned there was a genocide? What would the U.S. do? And then I went off on a tangent about the death toll between Israel and Palestine. How did 3 U.S. service people getting killed have anything to do with what's going on in Israel? My friends, it has everything to do with what's going on in Gaza. And the next story that I'll pop on here is drone attack on American troops risk widening Middle East conflict and drawing in U.S.-Iran tensions. This is why it's going to start becoming a big deal, because the U.S. is an ally of Israel, has supplied Israel with lots of weapons historically, and since this terrorist attack of October 7th, the U.S. has supplied even more weapons to Israel. The U.S. at the same time is saying, hey, Israel, try to contain it. Please try to prevent civilian deaths while you're trying to get the terrorist people. But it is quite literally, and I do mean literally, impossible to try to root out individual terrorist elements in urban areas. So I don't know what the numbers are, but let's pretend there's a really big group of people that are members of Hamas. Let's pretend there's 100,000 Hamas members. That number seems high to me, but I really don't know. It could be 500,000 Hamas members. It's not that high. It's probably more like 10 to 50,000 people who are active Hamas members. And for those of you not in the know, Hamas is a political organization in the Gaza Strip that also has a terrorist wing. Hamas was actually a political party that won elections in Gaza, gosh, what's that, 15 years ago, and was controlling the Gaza Strip, and slowly over time became so dissatisfied with the lack of action, both with their own party and with relations with Israel, that they formed a militant wing, and the militant wing does conduct terrorist attacks. So what you heard about on October 7th of last year was this Hamas group, without any outside advisors from any other countries. It's been kind of conclusive that they did it all internally. They did not have any sponsors from outside the Gaza Strip. Put together this brutal, horrific terrorist attack where they ran across the border and kidnapped 400 people and then just slaughterhoused men, women, and children of all ages and sizes and creeds and colors, and a true act of terrorism. Its intended point was to create terror. And now Israel has attacked this group in Gaza to try to root them out. Now, the reason I was saying about how many there were, I said, let's pretend there's 10,000. Let's pretend there's 50,000. Hell, let's pretend there's 100,000 Hamas members. There's 2.1 million people in the Gaza Strip, packed into very small urban areas. How do you get 10,000 people out of an urban area that has 2 million people? And the answer is you don't, without killing a whole bunch of civilians. And that's why this is such a hot button issue between people, between governments around the world, between people in the United States, amongst students in colleges in the United States. Some are pro-Palestinians, protect the Palestinians. Some are pro-Israeli, saying, hey, Israel has every right to go get these Hamas people that conducted this horrible terrorist act. Does that help you understand the angst on college campuses all the way up into the U.S. Senate and between governments on planet Earth? People are very divided by this issue of, doesn't Israel have a right to go get the bad guys? And the other side, it's like, maybe, but they don't have the right to kill 25,000 civilians while they're trying to do it. So that's what you're hearing on college campuses right now, is the pro-Palestinian, which could also be interpreted as just a peace movement of like, hey, maybe don't kill a bunch of civilians. So you could say you're pro-Palestine, or you could just say you're pro-peace, versus you're anti-terrorist and or pro-Israel. So you can even label both sides of this argument in multiple ways, but you get the angst between the groups, again, within universities all the way up to the United Nations. That's what this angst is about. Now, let me get back to our final minutes here that I'll just tease you. I'll pepper some things in that we can pick up next week. Is what's this? Why did 3 U.S. service people just get killed? What's that got to do with anything happening in the Gaza Strip? Well, because there are other entities within the Middle East who are very pro-Palestinian and who do think a genocide is occurring. And these are countries that have weapons that are helping Palestine or any other group that is pro-Palestinian. And I'm talking specifically, as this story is pointing out here, Iran. So what has been happening is this is a war of proxies, and you're going to learn a hell ton about proxy wars in chapter 25 of the book this year, because I talk about proxy wars in the book that I wrote last year, mostly in terms of, are proxy wars going to break out between the United States and China? 2 big powers who don't want to fight each other directly, but you might have a proxy war. And those are wars that the United States and China both fund other people to go fight, if that makes sense. It actually, the word proxy war is now much more applicable to what's happening in the Middle East, because the United States does not want to go fight in the Middle East. Iran doesn't want to get into a true war with the United States or with Israel. So no one really, the powers that don't like each other don't really want to fight each other, but they're supporting others that will fight on their behalf. And so the proxy fight that's occurring in this map that you see is ever since October 7th, when the Hamas terrorist attack on Israeli soil occurred, and subsequently Israel's war on the Gaza Strip to root out those Hamas folks. Ever since that bloodbath has started, there have been now multiple other folks facing off in the name of this face-off against Israel versus the Palestinians. Does this make sense so far? And what I mean by that is, you see in the map here, Iran has fired missiles into Iraq and Syria and supported local militia attacks on U.S. bases there. The one from 48 hours ago is just such an attack. Israel is battling Hamas in Gaza. There's also another a group that Iran supports called Hezbollah that's located in Lebanon. And so Iran supports Hamas. Iran supports Hezbollah. Iran is anti-U.S., so Iran supports other groups all across the Middle East that will attack U.S. targets and or attack Israeli targets. So Iran helps fund and perhaps organize Hamas, the group that started all this mess on October 7th, although we could go back 50 years when this mess truly started. But the current round of fighting, Hamas initiated that. Hamas is supported by Iran. Hezbollah, the group in Lebanon, is supported by Iran. And also you might have started to hear about these people called the Houthis that are attacking ships in the Red Sea, that are launching missiles into the Red Sea. Houthis are another group that is supported by Iran. And the United States actually has not been fighting against Palestinians and not been fighting against Iran directly, but the United States has now sent ships and is deploying missiles and bombing with drones the Houthis in Yemen to try to stop them from attacking ships in the Red Sea. And now you're starting to get... And Iran certainly supported this other whack-ass crazy group that is the ones responsible, who has claimed responsibility for attacking that U.S. base in Jordan 48 hours ago. So this is what a proxy war is. Now you have the U.S., Israel fighting Hamas, right? That's the war. But now these other entities, which are on one side or the other of the Israeli-Hamas situation, are also fighting, but not directly. That's what a proxy war is, and that's what's happening all over the Middle East. And back to this story here, this drone attack on American troops, is this now going to be the thing that pulls the United States in directly? Has Iran crossed a line now, and the United States and possibly even Israel might start launching missiles into Iran proper as a retaliatory effect of what Iran is doing with these other groups? So that's why, although we're running out of time here, I'll pick this up next week. I can start next week by talking in brief about the exact Hamas attack on Israel that's shown in this map here back on October 7th, and what's been going on ever since then, which is Israel's hugely destructive attack back on the Gaza Strip. And you can go just Google and see all of the destruction that's been happening in the Gaza Strip, and tons of maps online. However, I'll leave you with this tonight. This proxy war that's occurring is part of a greater something called the Shia Crescent. And this is what we're all starting to worry about is this going to turn into a bigger regional war between the United States and its allies against Iran? Iran, for its part, probably does not want a direct war because they will lose a direct war with the United States. However, their proxies are now starting to get out of their control. And what we call the Shia Crescent, and again, I'm just going to introduce this because there's too many concepts I'm throwing at you. It's called the Shia Crescent because there's actually two divisions between Islam. It's not really divisions, it's two different sects within Islam. Most Islamic folks are what we call Sunni. Most Arab states are Sunni Muslims. Iran is the epicenter of Shia Muslims. And Shia and Sunni is a division that occurred over 1,000 years ago. Yeah, 1,300 years ago. It was a division that occurred that wasn't a big deal at the time, but it's grown over the centuries into kind of two different sects of Islam. And Iran is the Shia kind. Iran is overwhelmingly Shia. And it supports Shia peoples across the Middle East and maybe even terrorist groups that are affiliated with Shiaism across the Middle East. What this little map here is showing you is the red dots are where Iran-backed militias occur. And the pink states are friendly to Iran. And this is a better one here, I think. Empire proxies. Iran now has these tendrils across the Middle East to support uh, fellow Shias in Iraq. So Iran is something like 99% Shia. Iraq, although there's Sunnis there, is like 65% Shia. Syria actually is only like 10% Shia, but it's the people in power in Syria are Shia. Hezbollah in Lebanon is a Shia group. Hamas is not necessarily Shia, but Iran is supporting them just because they're fighting against Israel. So, and the Houthis down in Yemen are Shia. So all of these attacks that I've now referred to in that other article, you're starting to put together the pieces of, oh, a lot of this is Iran-backed, and the United States hates Iran, Israel hates Iran, Iran hates the U.S., Iran hates Israel, Iran used to hate all the Arab states. So this is a competition of major powers now, that the spark that has been lit, the fuse that has been lit by the Israel's war against Hamas, is now starting to spread to other proxy fighters that have other missions. But it seems like everybody's now wants to throw missiles and start something bigger, and the United States might get pulled into it. That's why all of this is such a big deal. Even if you don't even care about what's going on in Israel or the Gaza Strip, you might want to care because it looks like it might be spiraling out of control into a wider regional fight that will include the United States and possibly its European allies. And I love this from the New York Times. The regional war no one wanted is here. How wide will it get? So you got the U.S. led attacks against the Houthis in Yemen, and the U.S. supporting Israel with weapons, even though it doesn't want Israel to kill all of the Palestinians. And you have pro-Palestinian groups and just anti-Israeli groups who want to get in on this fight because the fighting is happening. Does that all make sense? Sorry to go off on so many tangents, but to do this properly, I really need to kind of go back in time and tell you, okay, how did all of this even start? What is this whole territorial fight about in Israel and Gaza? And what is Gaza Strip versus the West Bank and Lebanon and Hezbollah and Hamas? What are all these names? I've inundated you with a whole bunch of stuff tonight, but let me know what you would like to learn most about. I usually try to go back and say, let's talk about these terms first. Let's talk about the territories. Let's talk about the terms. All right. And now let's start talking about the events as they have unfolded into the modern era that have gotten us to this point of a perhaps wider regional war getting ready to just blow up out of all proportion and involve all sorts of actors that aren't even from the Middle East. Does that make any sense to you? Again, I threw a lot at you, and I kind of tripped over some headlines, and I talked about Hamas. I talked about Israel. I've talked about Hamas, Hezbollah. I've talked about the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Shia Crescent, proxy wars. So you just got a full Plaid Avenger dose of what's happening in the world, and it's too much in one sitting. So what would you like to know more about? I'll end with this question. If we stick with this topic for next Monday, what would you like to know more about at this juncture to understand it more? Or do you want to move to another topic? What do you not understand, even after I've given you 30 minutes of facts spit on the screen? What do you still not understand? What would you like to know more about? What other topics would you like to know more about in the Middle East or the rest of the world? Does that make sense? And you can text them in here right now, and I'll read them, or you can email me, because that way they'll be on my mind in the permanent copy. And I see Fadi actually chimed back in at 851 and says it sounds similar to what happened with the Rwandan genocide, where they called it random acts of genocide, like you said in this week's video. It's shocking that the UN doesn't recognize this as an act of genocide either. Fadi, that is correct. There are lots of people in the world, and perhaps lots of people within the United Nations, who do think it's a genocide and want to label it as a genocide. But that's what the United Nations and what governments are for, is to balance things out. So there are other people who don't consider this a genocide. So political bodies get together to deliberate, and that's why they have rules and structures to get together on the same page with rules of deliberation of how we're going to move forward. The rules on conduct and deliberation when it comes to genocide are very stringent. That's why no one's, to my knowledge, the United Nations has never called anything a genocide or voted on it as a body and said this is a genocide. Perhaps with the exception of the Holocaust, but that was before the United Nations was even created. So it is a very hard process to go through the United Nations and get things termed a genocide. And that's why it has not happened yet. And a lot of people are very passionate about it on both sides of the spectrum, or both sides of the issue, I should say. Okay, Fadi says, very interesting with the proxy war. I'm just hearing about this news now. Thanks for sharing. Pinkish says, I'd like to know more about the historical context. Surely October 7th didn't happen to provoke terror for little to no reason. Oh, no, Pinkish. There's the Hamas group quite intentionally was conducting a terrorist act for reasons that they will tell you in great detail. I will try to give you a thumbnail sketch of their approach and their attitude and why they would be led to a place to commit such a horrific act. Not that I agree with the act, because no one should really agree with the act, but they would the Hamas group would argue we were pushed into a corner and we did this radical crazy thing because of things that were happening to us. So there is a backstory to that for sure. Hot Pound says it'll be a fun game to see how far back it really goes. Someone say the Mongols started the whole problem. Oh, I like that. Yeah, Hot Pound. The Mongols did sack Baghdad back in the 1300s. But we are out of time. We're already 12 minutes over. So good night, everybody. Thank you. Mystify says thank you. Have a great night. J.K. Waite says I'm curious about our Scandinavian and Eastern European friends with a renewed Russian aggression. Yes, it does seem like there is a lot of angst and conflict in the world right now. We were only talking about the Middle East for the last 20 minutes. But there is a lot of other action happening on planet Earth as well, with the Russians, with Ukraine, with China and Taiwan. And there's always some horrific act happening somewhere that I don't even know about yet. So please email me your suggestions for questions you have if you want to pick up this topic or other topics next week here on the Plaid Avenger Twitch channel. But for now, as always, party on and have a great week.